communication. Okay, let's switch on over. So as Corey gets the PowerPoint set up, this is from Gary Chapman's work, The 5 Languages of Love. And with most authors, he's written the 5 languages of love for kids, the 5 languages of love for singles. The guy just took off from his original work, The 5 Languages of Love. Okay, so I thought a great place to start is do a recap of the last 2 weeks. So Corey, if you'd buzz over to the first slide. There's something about subtitles at the bottom, Corey. I don't know if you can see that. Or that might be just on my screen.
That means, oh, there they went away.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about Love Addict. If you remember, it's literal separation, death, divorce, separation, and adoption. When we have, when a person goes through literal abandonment, yes, there are attachment issues. There's not enough attachment because the person literally isn't there. Therefore, there's not enough love. And for the love addict, they live out of a place of fantasy. On the other side of the coin is the love avoidant. And this is from an over-involvement of a caregiver, parentification of a child, meaning that the child is responsible for the adult's emotional welfare. I believe I used the example 2 weeks ago of a father passing, a 10-year-old son is the oldest son in the family, and now he becomes the man of the house. And everybody goes through the funeral line saying, yes, you are the man of the house, Tom, you're the man of the house. And a 10-year-old boy doesn't even know what that means. Emotions are too intense for the love avoidant, hence they avoid. And that the love avoidant lives with high walls. They put up protective barriers around their heart, around the ability to engage in any kind of heated argument, longing, needy from their partner. So at the end of the seminar last 2 weeks ago, how do you love yourself? Well, we have to have boundaries that are healthy. There have to be boundaries that are flexible, and some are fixed. So in my house as a recovering woman, the fixed boundary is no alcohol, period, is allowed in my house. I pay the bills. This is my safe place. And hence my children don't come over too often, partly because they drink, I don't, and my house is a sober home. Big book of Alcoholics Anonymous says a price has to be paid. It's at the end of Bill Wilson's story, and he's right. And so when you have fixed boundaries, you're probably going to find yourself in a place where a price is going to have to be paid. When you say yes, a no is around the corner. When you say no, a yes is around the corner. So some healthy boundaries, fixed and flexible. Really helpful to have support outside of the family to love you, hence 12-step meetings, sponsor other people who understand what you're going through. Family members are not always going to understand. My family, for example, has really no idea about the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. They know they exist, but they wouldn't know how to work the steps to save their lives. And maybe one day they will. Keep to the facts. If you're in a heated argument, keep to the facts. It's hard to argue facts. And within that, try not to blame. Blaming is the discharging of personal pain and discomfort. So when we get into a blaming place, we're not owning our pain, we're dumping our pain on someone else, or they're dumping it on us. So stick to the facts, no blaming. When you're in a heated argument, a suggestion I would have is to keep things simple. Simple sentences, simple words. When you get a bit heated, simplifying to help lower the intensity is probably a good idea. And of course, ask for help. So, quick review of week 1. Corey, if you'd move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. Taylor, if you want to jump in at any point, you want to take over, talk about your...
I definitely can. Sorry, my camera feature is not working, but what we talked about last week was really moving from this place of reaction to a place of response. So remember, instead of being like a volcano, be like the ocean. The ocean still ripples and has its moments of being controlled by other forces, but it always comes back to the same rhythm. And that's all kind of embodying this thing called emotional sobriety, right? And Tion Dayton says our ability to live with balance and maturity, our thinking, feeling, and behavior are reasonably congruent, not held captive by any one of them. And that's how she defines emotional sobriety. I also talked about how the hard work of achieving emotional sobriety looks like getting honest and preparing for meaningful action, unpacking your backpack. So kind of putting that heavy backpack that we all carry down and unloading it. Find your people and rewrite the narrative. So find the people that support you and your lifestyle and uplift you, and not necessarily co-sign everything that you say, but support you. And learn those emotional regulation and self-soothing tactics and coping skills. And the 5th thing was lighten up, have some fun, start to enjoy life for what it is. I think you're muted, Meredith.
Let's try this. Move on to the next slide. Thank you for whoever reminded me. I'm okay. If you have any questions, type them in the chat, send them to Corey. I'm on my little iPad. I don't know what'll come through, so feel free at any time to ask questions. Again, this book was written by Gary Chapman. I put this quote in: the supreme happiness in life is the conviction that we are loved. Go Victor Hugo. I disagree with the end of the quote. When I see an ED ending with a period, I smash into a brick wall. What I prefer is the supreme happiness in life is the conviction that we are loving. A nice action ending, ing, because this isn't just about me being loved, it's also about you being loved. And when we have 2 people loving, now we have a working relationship, even if it's difficult. So thank you, Victor Hugo, but I would change the ending to we are loving. Okay. Next slide, please. Dr. Martin Luther King, we must discover the power of love, the redemptive power of love. And when we do that, we will make of this old world a new world, for love is the only way. I hold that love is the greatest healer. I hold that for lots of reasons. Personally, having therapists that loved me through my anger, through my tears, being irritable and discontent in their office. They just held a place for me to be who I needed to be, express what I needed to express, and they still loved me. When in relationship, especially when you have love addict, love avoidant, or emotional relapse going on, this idea of love is the greatest healer may fly out the window, or that we're loving each other in this communication breakdown may go out the window. bring it back eventually, because for me, love is the greatest healer that there is. So thank you, Dr. King. Go ahead and move on, Corey. Thanks. These are fairly old statistics, as you can see, 2005, and they're still about right. The point here is not to get divorced because subsequent marriages end in divorce. So divorce really isn't the answer statistically. We need to hang in there and work through our struggles in marriage and relationship. Okay, we can move on. So the illusion of love. This is, what is her name? Deborah. I'm sorry, I have forgotten her last name, but she did work around and created a term, limerence. And so Dr. Deborah, I'm so sorry, I just can't think of her name. She talks about the illusion of love. You're going to see in subsequent slides, there's an allusion to love because love starts out as a chemical. Phenylethylamine is a hormone that is produced in the body. When you see someone, you have a woohoo response. I can see somebody picking up an orange, they're handsome, and I am married to them and living in the south of France on a yacht.
I don't understand.
Sorry, that's my phone. It's talking back to me. So the illusion of love stems out of this idea of our bodies producing a chemical when we see someone. So the illusion of love, that we have intimate love. Nope. At the beginning of love, you're in chemical. Intimacy is really, let me show you my ugly, let me show you my fear, let me show you my hurt, let me show you my anger. That's when love really starts. So the idea that we start with intimate love, nope, not according to Deborah Tenoff is her name. We feel altruistic, unselfish toward each other. Nope, we don't. We're pretty selfish, self-centered people because, again, if you're looking at love addict, love avoidant, or you have been emotionally stunted by caregivers, you're going to want that person to love you, to fill that hole. So are we unselfish? We really aren't. We think we're going to give our lives up to make our partners happy. Yeah, no, I don't know if I mentioned 2 weeks ago, Anthony DeMello's book, Awareness, and somebody comes to him and says, yeah, I want you to give up your happiness to love me. And Anthony replies, and I'm going to give up my happiness to love you. And in the end, he says, well, two unhappy people, but long live love. So, yeah. We think we want to give up our lives to make people happy, our partners happy. Yeah, probably not the best idea. And that we would never do anything to hurt our partner. No, that's really not accurate. We get into pain, we get into discomfort, we get into disagreement. This is part of being in relationship. So understanding that we get, we have tough things we have to work through. And some of those things are probably going to hurt each other. It's what we do with the hurt when it pops up, which becomes important. Scott Peck, the next slide, please, Corey. Thanks so much. Scott Peck, Road Less Traveled. The very first sentence of that book, which, by the way, back in the 70s was on the New York Times bestseller list in the #1 slot, I believe, for 3 years running. And the first sentence of that book is life is difficult, which is very telling about the radical nature of Scott Peck's work. Falling in love is not real. Because again, you'll see the chemical, the phenylethylamine. He also talks about dopamine and norepinephrine as chemicals that are produced when we see somebody. Falling in love is not real because it's effortless. Nope. When we really fall in love with someone, it's challenging. Our needs, wants, and desires are not going to match to one. They just aren't. We come from different backgrounds. Someone might be love addict, the other person might be love avoidant. Maybe two love addicts get together, or two love avoidants get together, or both people are emotionally bankrupt. And so, it takes work to be in love. Easy to fall in love because of the chemical, hard work to be in love. And then the one who falls in love is not generally interested in fostering the personal growth in the other person. So my second ex-husband barely made it through high school. His brain just didn't work like that. He worked very well, a carpenter, much better with his hands, but he was a great athlete. So they pushed him through high school because of his athletic ability. So we get married, and at the time I hadn't finished my undergrad college work, and I decided to go back to school. And I came home all excited. I signed up for classes, and he looked at me and he said, "We didn't discuss this." It was like the air was popped out of my balloon. It wasn't a slow leak, it was a pop. And I realized I continued to go to school up to get my PhD. At that point, we were divorced. And I realized that I believe in my heart of hearts, he felt threatened, that as I was going to continue my education, I would leave him behind. And I have to say, that's what happened. I didn't want to admit that at the beginning, especially newly into our divorce, but that is in part what happened to our marriage. I moved on and educated myself, and he barely made it out of high school. So he wasn't interested in me gaining a stronger sense of self, educating myself. And that became a problem because it was a battle for 6 years when I went through my undergrad, and then for 3 years of my master's. Okay, so we can move on. What is long-lasting love? Well, to be genuinely loved by another, or to be genuinely loving toward each other. And for Gary Chapman, he says we really have to learn our partner's love language. And more importantly, we have to learn what our love language is, to be really good at communicating and providing someone else's love language. My father grew up in the South. Parents pretty unemotional. My mother would take a switch to my father if he didn't get A pluses. My grandfather was a silent, gentle giant. So my father never grew up sharing feelings. When my mother passed, he would cry alone in his bedroom. Myself and my siblings would sit outside his bedroom and listen to him cry. He never came out and shared that vulnerability with us. At the funeral, I don't think he shed a tear. It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's what my dad learned. And so I grew up because my father gave me things. And I grew up thinking that my love language was things. We'll get into the love languages specifically in a moment. Yeah, not my love language. And in fact, I'm adding a love language to the 5 love languages which maybe one day I'll do some research on it, but not today. So intimacy, let me show you who I really am, and then love me despite of the warts that I show you. Go ahead and move on. So Solomon wrote, the tongue has the power of life and death. So let's move on to the next slide. These are the 5 love languages. And we're going to start with affirmation based on Solomon's quote. Go ahead and move forward. So the 5 love languages, is this information that's going to blow your mind? Probably not. It's going to feel probably common sense to all of you. And let's talk about affirmation. So positive affirmations, I really appreciate you. You look sharp in that suit. When we receive affirming words, we are more likely to motivate to reciprocate. So one could suggest that we all do well with words of affirmation. If you go online, there is, and I don't know if I put it in the resource section, but if you go online and put in Gary Chapman's 5 Languages of Love, there is a test of 30 questions that you can answer. It's one question with 2 responses, 2 different kinds of responses. And the 2 different kinds of responses correspond with the 5 languages of love. There is a key telling you A, B, C, D, E, and what the 5 languages correspond with A, B, C, D, and E. So if you wanted to take an unofficial quiz, there is something online. So I think we all benefit from having somebody say, hey, you look great today. I love you so much. Encouraging words, so these are slightly different. These are words that you offer your partner or your partner offers to you to help you get through rough times, to give you a new perspective, if you're fearful about going to the dentist or giving a presentation, your partner is going to be encouraging. Love words, kindness. We begin to develop intimate relationships when we use words around beauty, joy, forgiveness, kindness. And so love words differ a little bit from encouraging words. If we wish to love each other, we need to know what the other person wants. We'll talk about that, about how you find out what your love language is or your partner's love language without taking the quiz. And then humble words. This is in the book. You know those apple pies you make. Would it be possible for you to make one this week? Or haven't had an apple pie since the baby was born? Yeah, I would not go with option 2. So we learn to become humble in our words with our partners. So I want to just stop there and see if there are any questions that have come up.
Nothing in the chat so far.
Great. So let's go to takeaways. So a wise tongue is a guarded tongue. Sometimes, as I stated before, especially in heated arguments, using shorter sentences, simpler words, not to mean that we're simple people or the argument is simple, but we want to begin to lower the intensity. So sometimes a guarded tongue is better than a tongue that continues to wag. Sometimes a gentle gentle words versus a harsh tongue, harsh words. Very difficult to do when you feel your needs aren't being met or you're not feeling heard. It's very difficult sometimes to be understanding and gentle. I'm certainly at fault of that in my relationships with people. Today, sometimes I just go silent. If I don't know what to say, I just don't say anything at all. It's okay to stop, breathe. One of the things I do in meditation is I have people begin to separate themselves from their thought, feelings, memories, actions, because we need to practice putting breath, space, and time between those hurts that pop up. Because when the hurts pop up and then we speak harshly, it can set the tone and really do some damage. So sometimes the best option is to just take a breath take a breath, go to your separate corners, go out for a walk. Even if you don't want to take separate corners, go outside, do an activity, but do it in silence so that you're together, especially somebody who is love addict and has abandonment issues. But you could be together and be in the silence until you can get down to the heart stuff, the heart hurt, and then express from the heart versus from the head. So we'll move on to the next love language. Gary Chapman's love language is quality of time. So we're analyzing problems to create solutions. We can't forget that a marriage isn't a project, but a relationship. It's not a problem to be solved, but I like the word challenge. That makes us masters, where problems for me keeps me a victim. So I want to have a marriage that has some challenges in it and allow those conflicts to become challenges so that we can work through them together. For quality of time, maintaining eye contact. This is difficult with a love avoidant because of the intensity, right? The eyes are windows to the soul. So if you're in relationship with a love avoidant and your love language is quality of time, it may take some gentleness to engage in eye contact. Again, especially with a love avoidant. My second ex-husband and I don't listen to spouse and do something else at the same time. When he and I would have conflict, he would watch TV and I would knit a complicated pattern. Cables, baubles, counting stitches. And so when we were trying to have quality of time, we never did, because we had other things going on while we were trying to be together. For Gary Chapman, that is not quality of time. Listen for feelings. In quality of time, learn to observe the body language. So open stances, arms at side, there's a softness to the body. And let's say a hurt is touched and you or your partner stiffens, arms cross the chest. This is what we would call a closed stance. So we want to start to be attentive of not only what someone is saying, words of affirmation or hurt, and what the body is doing. I believe Taylor spoke, or maybe I mentioned Vessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score. The body keeps the score. And so we want to pay attention to the body. Really hard to interrupt. We want equal time when we're processing through, in particular, a challenge. So we have to practice not interrupting and allow our partners. And here it may feel mechanical until it doesn't. And what I mean by mechanical, okay, you're going to get the first 15 minutes. I'm going to get the second 15 minutes. And if that's what it takes to get through a challenging situation, please use it. It will get easier. Practicing empathy. Brene Brown does a great job if you haven't seen it on empathy. Empathy is feeling with someone, feeling with your partner. An example I use when I'm lecturing is your neighbor's close family pet, a dog of 15 years has died. The whole neighborhood knew the dog and knew how much the dog meant to your neighbor. And you go over with a casserole and you say, here's some food. I'm so sorry. I got to go. That's not really empathy. You're being sympathetic. You're not being empathetic. Empathy is going over with no food, sitting down on the couch with your neighbor and talking about the lost pet. So again, when you're in a difficult situation, you may not be able to practice empathy in that moment, but it's a worthy endeavor to keep striving for, that in the moment of conflict, you can tap into me too. The next slide, please. So quality of time, it's suggested try sharing 3 things that happened to you during the day. Even though you may have been with your partner in COVID, locked up, you can share 3 feelings, 3 thoughts, and you each have an opportunity to share. Ingredients for quality of time. One of you wants to do what the other person wants to do. The other person's willing to do it, and you both know why you're doing it, to express love of being together. So an example I use, one person loves to play golf. The other person in the relationship loves to do antiquing. One Sunday you play golf, or 2 Sundays you play golf, 2 Sundays you go antiquing. You might not be thrilled with golf. I'm not very good at golf. That would not be an activity. We'd have to find another activity because, people just stop counting my strokes. So golf is not something that I do. However, the point is doing what your partner wants. And then the other 2 Sundays, even though they may not like antiquing, they do it because they love them as you love your partner, and go and spend time on the golf course. So moving on, 3 takeaways for quality of time. Because of our world, the way it is, it's nice to know we're going to have a little bit of freedom around COVID. You may have to prepare to do this love language. Negotiate, as I suggested, in terms of activity. So you might need to negotiate how you spend time. Again, it may feel mechanical at the beginning, do it anyway, and then practice flexibility. So, receiving gifts. So again, my father, coming from the South, he gave me things. So receiving gifts is a really, I think in our world today, one of the more used love languages. And it might mean that if it's somebody's primary love language, a new connection to money. We want to be cautious about this gift. I had a gentleman in my office many years ago, and we were talking about the love languages. And I said, well, what about flowers? And he would go, oh, no. When I would go out, have a bad night, binge drink, whatever the case was at the time, I would come home with flowers, and my wife equated flowers with my using. So we have to be a little cautious about how our partners view receiving gifts. The other thing to be aware of, this particular love language, is that your presence is a gift. Your personhood is a gift. Your heart is a gift. That it's not just about giving a present, but it is about being present. Your partner had a really bad day. Their love language is receiving gifts, and you sit with your partner on the couch and let them cry. Maybe they had a really tough day standing on their feet. You might rub their feet, draw a bath, make dinner, maybe take care of the kids and let your partner take a nap. So it doesn't have to always do with money, but for some people, it does. So the idea of receiving gifts. The other thing, if it's about actually giving a thing, you want to be aware of what your partner likes in terms of a thing. If you give your partner a candle, but they're really not into scented candles, probably not the best gift. They may be more in, maybe they want a hammer. Maybe they love to, hammer nails in a wall. So maybe a really special hammer would have meaning for them. So if your partner is about gifts, I invite you to think about what kind of physical item would have meaning for them. So next slide, please. So takeaways, remember, gifts don't always include money. Presents versus present. And a gift can be a small act of kindness. Now, this is going to lead us into acts of service. So act of service is doing something for your partner that they see as positive and beneficial. Again, acts of service may take some planning. Acts of service, as you see on the right, dishes, laundry, cooking, mowing. Both of you might be in 12-step programs, so it might be you both go to AA, one goes to AA, one goes to Al-Anon. You go to the same church, 2 different meetings, same meeting, you decide that the 2 of you are going to take the coffee commitment or opening and running the meeting for a month, helping those in need. And I want to talk about living a spiritual life in a moment. So an example of helping to feed those in need. So let's say, for example, that one person in the partnership, their family was very socially minded. And every other Thanksgiving, the whole family would go to a local food bank and help prepare a Thanksgiving meal for the homeless. Now, the other partner came from a very large family, and every Thanksgiving, they would have a big family gathering. So a compromise would be one Thanksgiving, we go and feed the poor, and the next Thanksgiving, we do a big family gathering. So again, this is where some negotiating takes place, creating time, discussion to fulfill the partner's love language of active service. So live a spiritual life. I'm working on a sermon I'm giving in a couple of weeks on mercy, grace, and spiritual gifts. So grace is inherently what we are. We don't have to do anything for grace. It is given to us by the universe. Mercy, on the other hand, is what we do for others. So that act of service, living a spiritual life, is offering mercy to others. Mercy in terms of forgiveness, mercy in terms of helping, mercy in terms of helping someone grow in their own spiritual life of happy, joyous, and free. So if your partner's love language is living a spiritual life, then it would behoove you, might not be your love language, but it would behoove you to ask yourself, how can I show mercy, not only to my partner, but also to others? And this is not the only way to live a spiritual life and live a spiritual life with your partner, but the idea of offering mercy to others might be a way that your partner feels loved. Okay, next, please. Acts of service, according to Gary Chapman, they're no longer common male or female roles in American society. I think that's pretty evident with COVID. I've certainly had plenty of men who have been stay-at-home moms, and women are the breadwinners. The other thing Gary says is that what we do before marriage is not necessarily what we do after marriage. Remember, if we're coming from a place of love addict, we're going to shift and change. We're going to be a chameleon to call a person in to help fill the hole that was created by a loss of attachment in early childhood. The minute we say I do, things start to change. That was my experience in my marriages, and I'm pretty sure it's probably happened with other people. So yeah, we have to be aware that after we say I do, or after 20 years of marriage, after 30 years of marriage, I know a couple that's married 49 years. Bless them, I will never be married for 49 years because I don't want to live that long. But for those people, things change within the marriage. So the idea of acts of service, that is also probably going to change over time. How that might look is the sandwich generation. A friend of mine's parents, one sister has moved away. Another sister has some challenges, and he is left probably going to have to take care of his parents and his sister. And he wants to because he loves all three of them. If he gets into a relationship, his partner is going to have to realize that this is part of his act of service. His love language is being this child who is left to take care of parents and sibling. So I'll stop there before we get to the last two. Love languages, any questions?
Nothing yet, Meredith.
Okay. Let's move on to the next slide.
Hold on one second. We just had Jenny raised her hand. So Jenny, if you want to unmute.
Yes, Meredith. I have this term, and I don't know if I made it up or if I heard it somewhere years ago, but I hold a lot of value in it. I believe that you give the most what you need the most. And I wondered what your
Yes.
perspective might be on
Oh,
that.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Gary will talk about that. He actually talks about that. So, yeah, not exactly in those terms, but you're right on, Mark, on how to cite your love language. Can I get back to that?
Sure.
Great. Let me get back to that. But yes, he talks about that. So you're right on, Jenny. So takeaways of acts of service. Willingness. You enjoy it because the act of service, because you love your partner and they love the act of service. And certainly an act of service is practicing gratitude. That can be really difficult for folks who are waiting for their loved ones to come home from treatment. There could be some anger and frustration that you've been home, taking care of the kids, the dog, paying the bills. And having some gratitude that your partner went away to treatment and is not drinking and needs to take care of themselves is probably a great idea. And the other side of the coin is the person that's been away for 30 days or however many days they've been away, that they hold gratitude that you have held the fort down while they've been away. So gratitude, nice little takeaway in doing an act of service. So I want to stop, and physical touch is great. Certainly there's so much research about babies being hugged and kissed. I saw one research of an African tribe that did not put a baby down for 6 months. The baby was held by the village for 6 months because they knew how much physical touch, hugging and kissing are important. Physical touch for some can make or break a relationship, because if it is your love language and you happen to realize you've married a love avoidant and the love avoidant doesn't want to touch, and you thrive and long for it, you're probably going to not be on the same train track with your partner. Your loved one's primary love language is physical touch. Nothing is more important than holding her or him when they cry. Again, that might be something you have to build up to. They may want you to hold them, but they may push you away at the same time. So generally, when people are having an emotional state, being there, holding a hand is really helpful. And for the love avoidant, that can be very scary. Most sexual problems in the marriage have little to do with the physical touch, but emotional needs. Yep, that's true. And I think, Taylor, do you want to jump in and talk about that last bit? Okay, so that whole idea of emotional sobriety. Now, before we move on, I want to talk about physical touch in terms of a more intimate physical touch than hugging or holding hands. So let's say your love language is physical touch, and for 15 years, you would go up behind your partner and throw your arms around their neck. But on this particular day, the person that you've thrown your arms around is about ready to turn around and hit you in the head with a frying pan. The thing about physical touch is that there may be trauma that the person isn't aware of, and you go up and attempt to do physical touch, and now after 15 years, they're ready to hit you in the head with a frying pan. They may have no idea why they've gotten angry, why they're pulling away. So we have to be sensitive to the fact that body memory may not come up for years, and when it does, to be kind and compassionate. And that is a challenge for an individual whose love language is physical touch, because for 15 years, there was lots of physical touch, and now there's very little. So want to just throw some caution to the wind about physical touch, body memory, and sometimes it's a slow process to work back. But that's part of being in love with someone, is when their hurt comes up, we practice patience and tolerance. Big Book talks about patience and tolerance, because we love the person and we have empathy that they have this body memory and all the memories flooding back and they're having a very hard time with it. So Physical touch is great, physical touch is important, and physical touch can trigger people after a long term of being in relationship with them. Some takeaways, next slide, please. Different kinds of physical touch, from holding hands, certainly to kissing, making love, rubbing feet, rubbing backs. My mother, she was a survivor of polio. Her left arm absolutely had no muscle mass at all, but boy, did she love it when we would rub her hands and pull her fingers because they were atrophying. And for some reason, she just really appreciated that. So it may take time, as I talked about, to reintegrate physical touch, especially if there's body memory. And I think it's important to have conversation about touch. What feels good and what doesn't, and what do I like, what do you like? It can be a difficult conversation for some because it's so intimate about sharing what your needs are, and asking your partner what their needs so you can actually fulfill their love language. So it can be a little uncomfortable, but I think we need to have conversation about touch. So winding down here, finding your love language. So here, I believe it was Jenny's point. If you look at bullet point 3 on the right, what you do regularly, express love to your spouse, that's your love language. So an example of this is I have a dear friend who was used as a weapon in her parents' divorce. And she would spend a lot of time with her grandmother, and her grandmother would encourage her to write cards, thank you cards, get well cards, just have a great day card. And this friend of mine who lives across the country kept sending me cards. And I'm like, well, this is really nice, but it's not my birthday and it's not a holiday. And I realized, because I know her story, that she loved her grandmother so much, and that her grandmother helped her through a very difficult time, that her grandmother, through card writing, was helping my friend feel loved and cared about. So I started to figure out, it takes time to go pick a card, put it in an envelope, stamp it, take it to the post office. So my friend really feels cared about when I send her a card because it's taking time. That's not my love language, but I do it because it's her love language. She did it for me. She sent me cards. I picked up on it and finally had the white light moment. This is a language of love for her. So I started sending her cards as to help her realize and know how much I love her back. What hurts you most? The opposite is probably your love language. So I'm trying to give an example of that. So physical touch may not be your love language, but you do like quality of time. It's a different kind of quality of time that you want to spend with your partner. What you request most, you're telling what your partner, what your love language is. That's where the quiz might come into helping you. So some ideas of how to find your love language. Next slide, please. Some final thoughts. Meeting my loved one's need for love is a choice we make daily. Not sure if you realize, maybe you do, that love is actually a choice to many researchers. And so to know and speak your partner's love language, conversely, they know and speak your love language, especially if it's not your love language, is the greatest act of all. So doing your partner's love language when it's not yours, they do your love language, offer your love language and it's not their primary love language, it's a sacrifice. And so one of the greatest sacrifices of all is doing a love language that does not belong to you. And so when an action doesn't come naturally to you, it is a greater expression of love. When the love tank is low, and I think this would speak to Taylor's work around emotional sobriety, we have to find a way to fill the tank. You may not be able to go to your partner. Both of you may have had a really tough day. So we have to find a way to fill our love tank when our partner is not able to be there for us and help us fill it. That's why we have fellowship and sponsors and people in our 12-step programs that are there when our loved ones cannot be. As I close this evening, so the last slide. Yep, they're the 5 love languages, and beneath that is acceptance. This is my love language. Growing up in my family, I mentioned this 2 weeks ago, I believe. I came from a very intellectual family. Scrabble, crossword puzzles. I had a very hard time in spelling and sounding out words. And so I just never really felt accepted in my family because everybody was wanting to play Scrabble and do crossword puzzles with each other. And so I worked really hard on being everything everybody wanted, and I wasn't me. And so I began to realize as I gave up drinking and drugging, working on my codependency, that my love language is acceptance. Accepting who I am, what I wear, what I talk about, foods I like. My kids, I have a wooden cross. I have a stairwell in the middle of my house, and I strung my mother's wooden cross because we got her a stone cross. And my kids are like, Mom, if you ever bring a date home, you got to take the cross down. Well, this thing is incredibly heavy to put up and down. And I said, yeah, no, because the truth of it is I'm honoring my mother and my father. And so I've learned to accept myself today. In working with addicts and alcoholics for the last 20 plus years, I have found in an unofficial research kind of way, and I asked them what they felt their love language was. And many times when I ask the question, they too say acceptance. Because for us who drink and drug, there's so much research about the disease model, and people still think it's a moral failure. I work with a particular population, an older population, and they hear alcoholic and drug addict, and they're thinking Bowery drunk or heroin addict on the corner. And that's the image they have in their mind. So they have a very hard time relating to step 1 because of the shame of being called an addict or an alcoholic. So I believe that addicts and alcoholics, their love language, if not primary, is up there, is acceptance. And I would fathom to say, if I ever do research, I probably find more support that Gary Chapman missed out on a 6th love language, and that is the love language of acceptance. It's not that we don't dip in to 1, 2, or all 6 of these love languages. For Gary Chapman, there's one primary one, hence why he put out the free quiz. But for me, I'm certainly, acceptance is my primary love language, but I'm also all about acts of service, because that's step 12 of a step 12 program, which ties into quality of time, which ties into words of wisdom, which ties into being present for another addict and alcoholic, which ties into, you know what, sometimes a hurting addict, alcoholic, Al-Anon, or Narcotics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, the 12-step programs, you know, a nice pat on the back, a nice hug, that goes a long way. So with that, if there are any questions I can answer. Yeah, so the rest of the PowerPoint is the way children feel loved. I'm not going to go through it because you have it. They're just some ideas and ways for children to feel loved. And of course, coming from week 1 and week 2, and the idea of attachment theory is critically important. And Dorothy Tenov, that's the limerence. That is her work about love as illusion. So you don't have to go through any more of them, Corey. You have the information in the PowerPoint. But if you do have questions, remember, feel free to email me. A couple of people over the week emailed me. I got back to you. I am taking some time off in the end of this week into next week. But when I get back to my office, if there are any emails that have been sent to my work, I will respond when I return. Corey, I see a hand up. I'm not sure if what that means.
Yeah, so that is, so go ahead, Jenny, and feel free to unmute, and other people, if you have questions, post them in the chat or raise your hand. I did also place the Survey Monkey into the chat, and I will send out the PowerPoint slides tomorrow along with the recording. So go ahead, Jenny.
Thank you. Meredith, referring back to your initial slide with the little figure, love addict versus love avoidant. And
yeah,
I'm wondering what your thoughts are. Is it possible that a person can, I have 2 parts to this question, that a person could be both a love addict and also love avoidant in certain aspects of both?
absolutely.
Yes.
I started out as a love addict and then had disastrous relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Marriage is not so good. So when I got out of my second marriage, I became a love avoidant.
Right.
I also think as we age, we shift, especially for women and menopause and what starts happening with the body. I have gone through menopause. The hot flashes, I was not in a relationship when I was going through menopause, but the hot flashes, whew, that was not a fun time. So you're absolutely right on, Jenny, that at different times in our lives, we can flip from one to another. Okay. Great observation.
Thank you. And the second part of this, under love avoidant, could you qualify a little more for me what the term over involvement means to children?
Sure. So mom and dad want to know everything the child or teenager is doing. They put a tracker on the phone and a tracker on the car and call us every half hour. And I'm going to call the house to make sure you've gone to your friend's house and pour your bag out. We're going to check your bag. They want to know about your friends at school. So, you know, they're just so involved in the child's life. A child, a teenager needs some room. They need private. They need to understand that they can have a place within themselves that their parents don't know about. It's part of the maturing process. So when a parent wants to get in there and know everything, in my opinion, that's over-involvement.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
I don't see any other questions or hands.
Well, okay. Then I guess I did a good job or semi-good job.